Hello and welcome to another episode of Thick Slices and Deep Cuts. Today I will be ranking the albums of death metal legends, masters of war, one of the originals from Coventry, England. I'm talking about Bolt Thrower, one of the original classic bands. I think they were originally lumped in with that grindcore scene because they had, in the beginning, maybe they had a little bit of that hardcore punk thrash thing going on, and there was a little bit of grinding early on, but for the most part these guys were just death metal, and the themes were always focused on war. So at any rate, I've got all 8 albums. We're going to rank them all, and for a band that is has a specific style of death metal, it's pretty impressive that they have 8 albums that are all either good or just classic. They have 5 albums that are 9 out of 10. They have 5, the top 5 albums that I'm going to rank here, the 5th should be a number 1. They have 5 number 1s. So it's going to be tough when I get past the first few rankings. When I hold up number 5, it's going to be painful because my number 5 is a 1, my 4 is a 1, so on and so forth. So, I guess we will just go ahead and get started. I guess the band consists mainly of Carl Willits, one of my favorite death metal vocalists of all time. I think you've got Martin Van Drunen, maybe John Tardy. I'm sure there are a few others, but Carl Willits has got to be up there. He just has the classic growl, the classic, it's just textbook the way you're supposed to do the growl. You've got Gavin Ward and Baz, aka Barry Thompson, on guitars. You've got Joe Bench. Yeah, you got a chick named Joe on bass. They've been there the whole way. And then originally you had Andy Whale on drums for the first, 5 albums? And then for the remainder you had a combination of, you had Martin Kearns on drums, but there was one album with a guy named Alex Thomas. But for the most part, all things considered, they didn't have a ton of lineup changes, and they had three people there throughout, and pretty much 4 throughout. So there you go. Again, one of the classic bands, one of the first bands to do this style. I mean, they had an album in '88. They had a second album in '89. They were on that Grind Crusher tour with Morbid Angel and Carcass and Napalm Death back in November of '89. So that tells you right there that they're one of the original bands. So. Okay, I think that covers enough of the basics here. So 8 albums, I'll rank them from 8 to 1. Like I said, they've got Nothing Bad and 5 classics. But something has to come in the 8th spot. And I don't think this is any surprise to anybody that knows the band pretty well. But at number 8, I have from 1998, I have Mercenary. This is the only studio album not to feature Carl Willits. He had stepped away from the band for... actually, I'm sorry. This is with Carl Willits. He had left the band after the previous album. But he did come back in. Martin Van Drunen was actually the vocalist for a short time before this album came out, but he had to step away. So Carl comes back in and helps them record this album, but then steps away again. So I guess he just came in to do the studio recording. My only problem with this album is the guitars aren't as present. This is probably the lightest guitar album. They sound a little thin. They don't sound as meaty as on the other albums. Also, the songs here are not bad, and everything's mid-paced at this point. They're not bad, but they're not doing anything we haven't heard them do better on previous albums at this point. And it just seems a little flat, a little uninspired, a little bit like we've already been here. You've already got a lineup change. The drummer on this is Alex Thomas. So this is the first time Andy Whale, he stepped away. So this is the first album with a different drummer. Carl Willits, although he had left, he is still the vocalist for this album. So they're still steady there on vocals. I really don't know what to say about any of these songs. They're not bad. They're just all kind of dull. But I guess Zeroed is okay. Powder Burns continues this theme, this augmented theme that they have running throughout different songs, which I'll get to as I get to those albums. But and you may hear it if you listen closely on the background music here. I mean, yeah, what did I say? Zeroed. The title track's okay. Powder Burns is all right. No Guts, No Glory. It's not. It's okay. I mean, if this is your worst of 8 albums, you're a pretty solid band. You're a legendary band. It's just compared to their other work, this just seems a little flat. It just seems a little uninspired. It's 1998. This kind of music in 1998, it was a tough sell at this point. It was tough to find any inspiration at this time. This was what, their 6th album overall, so they just done a bunch of classic albums. At some point, you know, they're on Metal Blade Records at this point, so this is their first one on Metal Blade. So there you go. That's what I've got coming in at the bottom from 1998. I guess this is their 6th album. I've got Mercenary. Okay, coming in at number 7, this is the album after Mercenary. It's from 2001. It's called Honor, Valor, Pride. And this has 3 title tracks. It has a song called Honor, it has a song called Valor, and it has a song called Pride. This one, I think, is a step in the right direction from Mercenary. They beefed up the guitars, and they've got a lot of good riffing on here once again. Better riffs, I think, than Mercenary. My main gripe with this album is Carl Willits is not on this album, and he is sorely missed. You've got Dave Ingram of Benediction fame, who I love in Benediction, but he steps in here and tries to do his best Carl Willits impression, it seems. It just doesn't... I think Dave Ingram's a good vocalist, but he just doesn't sound right on this. I guess you sort of get used to his voice after, 1 or 2 songs, you kind of get used to it, but it just doesn't sound right. It just sounds like Dave Ingram is a good death metal vocalist who's somewhat in the same vein as, Bolt Thrower, but he's just trying to be something else. That said, Inside the Wire is a good one. The title tracks are all pretty good. K-Machine, I recall being pretty good. A Hollow Truce, Contact, Wait Out right at the beginning. It's pretty good. They've got Andy Faulkner producing. He produced their final 2 albums, and I think he helps them with the production here. This one is also on Metal Blade Records. This is the first one with Martin Kearns in the studio. He was with the band, then stepped away during the Mercenary recording sessions, and came back, so on and so forth. But so this album has a different drummer for the first time and a different vocalist for the only time. Like I said, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think this would have been, it's too bad Carl couldn't have come in and done the vocals just for the studio sessions on this, because I think the riffing and everything is good. It's good enough for sure. So there you have it, their 7th album. And by the way, this was their 6th album. They have a song called 6th Chapter. This is their 7th album. You have a song in here called 7th Offensive. So they do that as well. So there you go, coming in at number 7 from 01. They're only one with Dave Ingram on vocals. They're only one without Carl Willits. You've got Honor, Valor, Pride. Okay, coming in at number 6. This could be, somebody could say this is a classic. They could bemoan the fact I have it at 6, which is how strong Bolt Thrower's catalog is, which is why I'm doing this review, is because they're just one of the classic bands. But at number 6, I have their debut. I only have it on vinyl, and I wanted to put it up on the wall, so I can't get it out, but it's right here. It's called In Battle, There Is No Law. It came out all the way back in 1988. It is raw and underground, but you know what? It sounds like Bolt Thrower out of the gate. And much like Carcass had their debut come out in 88, and it's really raw, but you can tell it's Carcass. Well, Bolt Thrower the same way. You can tell it's Bolt Thrower, but I think their production is actually all right for being bare bones production. I think some people try to say this is early grindcore. I mean, I think they came from that whole UK hardcore scene, but I don't hear any grinding beats. I hear a ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, like stuff like that. I mean, maybe I always thought of grindcore as like spastically fast, but I mean, it's okay if you want to label these guys in the early days as one of the grindcore bands. I've got no problem with it, but I just think that they're pretty much doing the death metal thing from the beginning. I mean, Carl is already got that bark and that growl down. Their themes about war are already totally in place. They've already got the classic lineup that would be the same lineup for the first 5 albums and through what many consider to be their entire classic era. So a lot of things are already in place right out of the gate. I think the title track's probably my favorite song on here, but also Attack in the Aftermath. You know, it's a good listen. It's only about 38. Actually, my copy has 9 songs. 9 songs, like 30 or 31 minutes. So it's a pretty quick listen. You know, everything's 3 minutes. A few songs are shorter, a few songs are longer, but and they have a different logo there. I don't know if you can see this and on the CDs I held up, but they have their classic logo on 7 of the 8 albums, but on that very first album they have this logo, which I actually really dig. Really dig that cover. So just a cool, classic, historically classic debut album, and a solid album at that. I mean, I have it at 6, but I said they have 5 classic albums. This could be a 6th classic album. I don't know if I'd give it a 9 out of 10. I might give it an 8 out of 10, though. It's not too far off the mark at all. And, you know, considering this music, in '88, there just wasn't much of this going on. You know, you had Death put out 2 classic albums in the '80s. You had Carcass with 2 in the '80s. You had Bolt Thrower with 2 in the '80s. You had, like, Pestilence, I guess. Maybe Napalm Death, I guess, and they were just purely grindcore at that point. But you just only had maybe a handful of bands in this grindcore death metal style that had any albums out in the '80s, much less 2 in the '80s. But so there you go. Classic debut. I have it at number 6, but it could be somebody's classic. And if you like to hear Bolt Thrower faster and grindier, just faster and, you know, not so mid-paced all the time, this might be the album for you. So coming in at number 6, their debut from '88, In Battle, There Is No Law. Their only one on Vinyl Solution, I believe was the label. So there you go. Okay, so I have 5 albums left, and I didn't know how to rank these. I just didn't know how to do it because they're all number 1s. So I tried to just do like a greatest hits, like truly real greatest hits, not songs that are good or really good, like the great ones. And so I started just pulling them over on my Windows Media Player, and based on how many I had from each album, that's how I decided to rank these tiebreakers. And some of those were tiebreakers too. So it pains me to put this at 5, but at number 5 I have their 8th and final album from 2005. I have Those Once Loyal. This album's great. Great. It's a great return to form. I think, you know, you had Mercenary and Honor, Valor, Pride, which were okay, but I think anybody listening to Bolt Thrower, this was 10 or 11 years, you know, we were waiting a good decade for an album like this, and we got it. You know, At First Light opens up. It's just, it harkens back to an album I'll get to in a little while from 1994. It just harkens back to that. It's like a continuation of that. It's just really good. It's all mid-paced at this point, although I guess The Last Stand of Humanity does have one little thrashing moment, but it's just good mid-paced stuff, but it picks up steam. You know, it gets slow and picks up steam, but it just stays within that sort of mid-paced realm. At First Light is great way to open it. The Kill Chain is one of my favorites. It's so catchy. It's the grooviest thing they've done. It's just one of those ones where you just, you know, you get into it. Granite Wall's good. The title track, Those Once Loyal, is one of the best. I think The Kill Chain and Those Once Loyal are just some of the best. I think At First Light is great. I think Anti-Tank, Dead Armor, that's a great one. Entrenched. When Cannons Fade to end this thing. I've got a bonus track, A Symbol of 8, because this was their 8th album, and that was one of the themes they had. I just think this is a really awesome album. Great production. I mean, this is '05. You're not, you know, at this point, this is their final album, their 3rd one with Metal Blade. Productions have come a long way by this point. Carl Willis is back. Martin Kern's still on drums, but you've got a classic lineup here. Carl sounds great. He's just belting it out in that low depth growl. I noticed that Joe Bench's bass is way up in the mix. It's got that clanky, distorted, classic death metal sound. And you can hear her bass lines all over this album. I think it's cool. It's the only one I think that I can think of off the top of my head. It's the only one I can think of where she's just, you know, her bass is prominent throughout the mix, but I think every song on here is, in like most Voltor albums, every song on here is pretty cool, and some are great, but I mean, I think the Kill Chain and Those Once Loyal are just absolute gems, and I think At First Light and Anti-Tank are great, and I think Entrenched and Granite Wall are excellent, and I think When Cannons Fade is a great way to wrap it up, but it was tough to put this at 5. I think also, I also kind of on the tiebreaker pulled this back to 5 just because it's just hard to put this above some of those classic albums. Even if this is as good as those, it pained me to put it any higher than this. But I think this is one of their classic albums. It's a 9 out of 10. It might even be better than that, but it's definitely just a classic album. I heard that they didn't make another album because they would write songs and they said it's not as good as Those Once Loyal, so why bother? I can respect that. So there you go, coming in at number 5, the first of these classics. I've got their 8th and final album from 2005. I have Those Once Loyal. Also, the band disbanded 2015, 2016. Martin Kearns died, I think, of a heart attack at the age of 38, their drummer. And so they decided to end the band at that point. But at any rate, this is a classic from 05, Those Once Loyal. Okay, at number 4, this might be a lot of people's number 1s. Got a goofy alternate cover here, but at number 4 from 1989, I have their second album. I have Realm of Chaos. I used to have it on cassette. You can tell where I started when I listened to the band, but this album cover, this original album cover, is their best album cover by far. And so I tried to buy the CD with that version, but man, you're going to have to pay a pretty penny to get that version of it. But at least I have it on cassette. But the cassette version is missing one of the songs that you could only get, I guess, back in the day. They wanted to encourage you to buy the CD, so they would keep tracks off of there. I think the one on here was Prophet of Hatred. I could look through here, but or was it? Maybe it was Plague Bearer. I don't know. It was one of those tracks. But at any rate, this is Bolt Thrower at their blastiest. Like if you want to call them grindcore, this is their most grinding album. This is lots of blast beats and thrashing, and the guitars are down tuned so low. I have a 7-string guitar that's down tuned to A. They are playing 6 strings down tuned all the way to A. So they're basically, one of the cool things I liked about death metal over some of the thrash, when I found this form of music called death metal, one of the things I liked about it was that these bands seemed to be not only more extreme, faster and deadlier, and more technical, but their guitars were tuned down even further than some of those thrash bands. And Bolt Thrower, it was the poster child for that on this album. So let's go through the classics, which they all are. All that remains, man. There's the first breakdown. I don't know if it's like 30 seconds in or what, but there's a breakdown where you can just hear the riffs, the guitars playing without any drums or anything. Whew, that's awesome. World Eater is, man, that might be my favorite song they've ever done. World Eater, we heard it to start this. Realm of Chaos, the title track. Prophet of Hatred has all kinds of tempo changes. That's one thing, if you like to hear Bolt Thrower doing lots of different tempo shifting, this is a classic album for that. Probably the best album for that. They have another, first one a little bit. There you have another album I'll get to that does a bit of that, but this one might be the epitome of breakdowns and tempo shifts and things like that. This is definitely first one produced by Colin Richardson, the legendary producer who seemed to do a lot of, Carcass comes to mind, Napalm Death, bands like that. Plague Bearer, Lost Souls Domain, Through the Eye of Terror. This is a classic album. It's a little, you got 12 songs, 38 minutes, and I think half of the songs are less than 3 minutes, so that kind of feeds into that grindcore aesthetic where it's a lot of 2-minute type songs. But man, they really, the production's raw, but it's that good kind of raw. You can hear what's going on. It's just an awesome, one-of-a-kind album from them. It's far more advanced than the first one, but still in this vein of just early raw. This is from '89, so it's the last of those. But I just find this to be an absolute gem. Again, I don't. It's at 4, but it's a number 1. It's a number 1. It's an absolute classic, and it's the second one I ever heard. And I got into. I cut my teeth on 2 of their albums for at least a year, year and a half anyway. So I have these. I have this one down pretty well, and I wasn't sure where it was going to end up in the ranking. I thought it might end up at 2 or 3. It's at 4 right now, but it's an absolute gem. And man, it bums me out that they switched the album cover, because if you can see that, that's just such an awesome album cover. But there you go, coming in at number 4, an absolute classic. Their first one on Earache Records. And by the way, these final 4 are all the Earache Records ones, in case you haven't figured that out by now. But everything they did on Earache Records was classic. So here you go, coming in at number 4, their second album, their first one on Earache, their first one with Colin Richardson producing. I've got Realm of Chaos. Man, coming in at number 3, I thought this was going to be my number 1. Like before, when I just thought about reviewing this, when I thought about reviewing Voltor, without really like going back into the catalog to compare, I just thought, off the top of my head, I was like, well, this one's my number 1. Well, it's my number 3 today, but it's a number 1. And that's from 1991, their third album, I have War Master. So before I even did anything, it's the first thing I ever heard from them. I just thought this was going to be the classic one that was going to get the number 1 nod. Awesome album cover there, too. By the way, they had a thing worked out with some board game. Warhammer 40K, and so they got some artwork done. So they had, I think they had a character or something called Voltor in the game, and I feel like that definitely was going on in Realm of Chaos, Slaves to Darkness, but it also on Warhammer. I feel like or on War Master, it's going on here. The production on this one done by Colin Richardson in a studio called Slaughterhouse Studios, which apparently burned to the ground after this recording. This is the last thing ever recorded there. I think Carcass did Symphonies of Sickness there. I'm sure Napalm Death did something there. But the production on here is just so much cleaner than on Realm of Chaos. I'm not saying that necessarily in a better way. I'm just saying it's just like, wow, you can hear everything. It's just all of the raw guitars and the low vocals. Carl's vocals are a little bit higher now. They're still guttural, but they're not as low as this. And the super down-tuned guitars are not as down-tuned here. I think that was part of it. Unleashed Upon Mankind is a classic. What Dwells Within might be, that's a top 10 Voltor song, I think. I mean, that's a greatest hits type song. What Dwells Within. It's just a cool mid-pace song. I noticed about this band right away. It was like, wow, they can just bring the death metal without having to thrash or grind. Which, by the way, they still thrash and grind on this, but this is the last album that they do that on. With the one exception of their final album, which for just a split second they do a little thrashing, but basically they're phasing out, slowly but surely, they start to phase out a little bit the thrashing and grinding. So on this album you have at least one track that doesn't have at least 2 tracks. There are probably more than 2. I'm just thinking off the top of my head that don't have any thrashing or grinding. And I think everything on the early albums has at least some stomping somewhere. Yeah, this was the one where on the cassette I didn't have a song called Destructive Infinity, so you had to get the CD to get the extra track. That's what it was. Anyway, other classic, Cenotaph is one of my all-time favorites. That was on this, if you go back to the beginning. That ties in this theme that started with World Eater. Has this riff that recurs, and it recurs on Cenotaph, which is the first song I ever heard from it. There was a video for it. And I think we covered, the Kill Chain off of their final album carries that riff too. And Powder Burns for Mercenary carries that riff. So this recurring augmented riff that started way back on World Eater continues on Cenotaph and on another song that I'll get to here. Anyway, Cenotaph's classic. War Master, the song. Every title track they do is classic, and War Master is no exception. Afterlife is a brutal way to end the album. Might be the most frantic, heaviest song on the album, so this is an absolute classic. So what did I say? Unleashed Upon Mankind, What Dwells Within, Cenotaph, Warmaster, Afterlife. The tracks I didn't mention are all good too. Shreds of Sanity, Profane Creation, Final Revelation, Rebirth of Humanity. So it's an awesome album, and it came out in 1991. That's my favorite year for death metal, period. And it was the first thing I heard. And like I said, before I started to listen to these albums, I thought this was going to be the one, and I thought this was going to be the two. But I just, when I do these rankings, I try to be as honest as I can. And in being honest, if I was being honest, those ones loyal might be higher than 5. I think I explained why I'm going to show respect to the classic albums from the Earache era. But there you go. Coming in at number 3, absolute gem, absolute classic from '91, their third album. Their final one to have any like thrashing and grinding. I've got Warmaster. Okay, so coming in at number 2, and these final two, this is where I kind of just was like, oh, I guess that's the kind of Bolt Thrower I listen to now. But at number 2, from 1994, this is their 5th album. I have For Victory. This was their final album on Earache Records, and their final album with this classic lineup that started all the way back in the beginning. So on here, I mean, you still got upbeat stuff, but there's no thrashing, there's no blasting at this point. However, what you get are just 10 songs. I mean, you get a 1.5-minute intro called War, of course. But it just comes in with this cannon blast and Remembrance, which is just great. It's just got everything you want, but it's stomping. It's just not thrashing or anything, but it's just a great, heavy track. At this point, Bolt Throwers figured out what their strengths are, who they are. They just play to their strengths, and they have such a nice signature sound that, they're fortunate. Like, a lot of bands sound like this band or that band, but these guys just, they found their sound. So When Glory Beckons, the title track for Victory is great. Lest We Forget, Silent Demise, Forever Fallen, ends with Armageddon Bound. I can tell with this song going that we're probably going to have to wrap it up fairly shortly. But I just find, as time goes on, I find myself listening to these songs. I was doing the greatest hits thing, and I just kept pulling song after song over from this album. And so I guess even though I think the coolest albums are Warmaster and Realm of Chaos, I think there are other albums that I just listen to more over time. And so I guess that's why this one's coming in at number 2 and not number 4. But it's just, everything on here is just solid in the production. The final one that Callum Richardson produced, the final one on Earache, but man, it really got the production down to a T. I mean, it's still a little bit raw because it's 94, but they really got it dialed in nicely. I think Carl sounds great on here. The guitars are sounding like meaty. The drums sound good. Just everything sounds great on here. The mix is great. So there you go. Coming in at number 2, their 5th album from 94, I got For Victory. And so that leaves only one. And I don't know if this is anyone else's number 1, but over time, it's my number 1. Their 4th album from 1992, I've got The Fourth Crusade. This album is the first time where they go mid-pace. They sacrifice the thrashing and the grinding for meatier guitars. So Warmaster was cleaned up and nice production. This one is actually probably a more raw production, maybe a lesser quality production, but what they do get is they get these big meaty guitars, and Carl's vocals are getting low again. And I just find, again, when I'm pulling songs over for greatest hits, I feel like everything on this album is a greatest hit for me. I mean, the title track to open it, The Fourth Crusade, is cool. It's a little repetitive, and this album's a little doomier maybe, but I like that. But it goes into Icon. My favorite song on the album might be Embers, which carries that theme from World Eater and Cenotaph and so on, and it continues with Embers. We're listening to This Time It's War. It's a little quieter on here, but for some reason the slower songs with the vocals being belted out the way they are, and these big guitar sound, I just really dig it. It's a little more raw, if you can believe that, than Warmaster, but just Where Next to Conquer, As the World Burns, This Time It's War, Ritual, Spearhead is one of my all-time favorites. That's one of my favorite Carl Willis ones, and that's a slow one too. It's just, all these songs are heavy, like a slow burn on all these. Dying Creed, Through the Ages is a cool way to end it. I think back in the day, I remember actually being slightly disappointed when this came out because it wasn't all grindy and thrashy, and the production seemed a little different. But in more recent times, I'm digging this album more and more all the time. Obviously, it's my number one. So real quickly to recap, number 8. I've got their 6th album from '98. I've got Mercenary at number 7. Their 7th album from '01. I have Honor, Valor, Pride. At 6, I actually have their first album from '88, In Battle There Is No Law. At number 5, I have Those Once Loyal. Number 4 from '89, I've got Realm of Chaos. Number 3 from '91, War Master. Number 2 from '94, For Victory. And number 1 from '92, The Fourth Crusade. Real quick, Who Dares Wins. It's a compilation that Earache put out. It's got EPs, the Cenotaph EP, and I guess the Prophet of Hatred EP. But it's got Cenotaph, it's got Destructive Infinity, which I couldn't get on the cassette back in the day. It's got Prophet of Hatred from Realm of Chaos. It's also got Realm of Chaos Live. Spearhead, an extended mix, like an 8-minute long version of that. Crown of Life, which was a track from the Fourth Crusade sessions that didn't make the album. Lament, another track from the Fourth Crusade sessions that didn't make it on the album. Dying Creed finds its way on here again. They do a song called Overlord I couldn't find anywhere else. And they do World Eater 94. They do a re-recording of World Eater. It's tuned up a little bit, and it's like 1 minute and 15 seconds longer, but that sounds cool. If you love World Eater, but it doesn't hit through the speakers sonically enough, which I think it does. But man, I love this alternate version too. It's so cool that you've got 2 awesome versions of that song. So I always thought this is essential. I think all 8 of their albums are worth owning. I mean, I think they're, even the 2 I ranked at the bottom, I think they're worth checking out because you might like them more than I do. But definitely they're the top 5 I ranked, and if you want to extend to this, which I think is a classic, they got 6. I think they got all 8 are classic, and I think this is essential too. They got Live War out there, which I don't know, you may want to check that out as well. But so there you have it. That is ranking the entire studio discography of one of the classic, like I said, the Masters of War, the legends of death metal, Coventry, England's own bolt thrower, classic band. So there you have it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.